Okay, so first we're going to do kind of a brief overview of general information about the MCAT and general advice. I know I'm sure a lot of you probably know a lot about the MCAT already, but we just wanted to kind of give a brief overview so we're all on the same page, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms and have the mentors answer your questions. So just give me 1 second and I'll share my screen. Alex, would you actually mind sharing the presentation if you have it?
No problem. Did you send it my way?
Yeah, I shared it with you.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
Okay. So
Which email did you send it to? Oh, got it. Never mind. All right. Give me 1 second. Going to share. Can everybody see?
Yep, we got it. Thank you. Okay, so this is, again, just some kind of general information. Can you go back to the first slide? Sorry.
Yep.
I think there's one more before this. Okay, so the basics, the MCAT is a 230 question exam. I think it's 7.5 hours now, including the breaks. And there are 4 sections: chemistry and physics, critical analysis and reasoning skills, biology and biochem, and psych-soc. And I know the MCAT can be super overwhelming initially. I promise it is for everyone. It's not fun. That's pretty obvious. So we just want to kind of help you guys break it down and kind of overcome that obstacle on the path to med school. Ultimately, the goal of the MCAT is to kind of prove to admissions committees that you can handle the academics of medical school. And that, of course, also includes your GPA. But those stats aren't everything. And I think a lot of people get kind of wrapped up in grades and MCAT scores when they're thinking about applying to med school. They are important, and kind of the point is to kind of get your foot in the door and just show that you would be able to handle med school. But there are so many other factors that AdComs are looking at in terms of admitting you into med school. So I promise the MCAT is not the be all end all, and it can be much more intimidating than it's worth. So try to keep it in perspective and remember that there's a lot of other things that admissions committees are looking at. Next slide. So the first step is to decide when you're going to take the MCAT. The AAMC releases specific dates that you can sign up for. They're pretty much all year. And ideally, you want to be able to see your scores before you apply to med school, because your scores might dictate where you're considering applying, or kind of like if you want to retake the exam, you want to make sure you have plenty of time to make that decision before you submit your application. It's not the end of the world if you don't get your scores before and you're a little on the later side, but it's just nice to know that in advance if you can. Of course, you want to work with your own schedule. If you're working full-time, part-time, if you're in school, you have to pick what's going to make the most sense for you and when you have the most time to dedicate to the MCAT. So just keep that in mind too. Some people are able to study full-time. Some people can only study a couple of days a week, couple hours. So just make a schedule that works for yourself. And another thing with the MCAT that kind of gets people stressed is how many resources there are out there. between all the different books and the test prep companies and the courses and Anki and all these different documents and everything out there, there's a lot going on. And I think the best advice I can give is just pick something. You're never going to be able to look at everything that's out there. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of people who are pro Kaplan or pro Princeton Review or whatever else there is. And not everything is going to work for everyone. We all have different study styles and strategies that work best for us. So my advice is to just pick some resources and stick with them. People are going to tell you different things about different resources. There's honestly not that huge of a difference. You just have to pick something and go with it and trust the process, because it is a process. But it's going to be okay if you don't look at every single MCAT resource that's out there. You can go to the next slide. So in terms of creating a study plan, this is what I did and what I usually tell people who I've tutored for the MCAT to do. I think it's smart to start with a diagnostic exam. Usually you can do like a half-length exam, so you don't have to do the full 8-hour test. It's just to kind of see like where your weaker areas are, what you might want to spend more time on, and to kind of see where you're starting from. It takes a lot to improve even just like 1 point on the MCAT. So you want to see kind of what your baseline is to see maybe how long you want to study or how many hours, or again, which sections you want to focus the most on. And once you have that, you can kind of work your study schedule around it. I usually tell people that you should split up your plan into like 3 big sections in terms of the timeline. You want to start with content review. So that's kind of the foundational knowledge, just making sure you know all of them, as much of the material as you can, in terms of like being able to answer questions. But the MCAT is, it does involve knowing things like off the top of your head, but a lot more of it, in my opinion, is about the strategy and understanding what the MCAT test makers want you to know and how they want you to answer questions, because it's very different than most exams you've probably taken in college or in any post-grad program. So I think that practicing questions and doing practice exams is really important to make sure you get plenty of time understanding how the MCAT wants you to think, because it's different than probably how you've had to think in the past. So I usually tell people to start with like 1/3 of their time. So if you're going to study for 3 months, the first month should be mostly content review. So you're going through something like one of the book sets, like I use the Kaplan book set, and just studying that information. I like to use Anki for that to get the knowledge down. And then the second kind of phase of studying should be more, it can still be some content review, keeping up with that, doing flashcards or Anki or whatever you want to do, but then integrating more practice questions, things like the UWorld question bank, to kind of get going on the more active recall type things and applying that knowledge, and to understand the logic of the questions again. And then for the later phase of studying, I usually tell people to do more practice exams. For me personally, I was doing like 1 exam per week towards the end of my studying. And that was kind of like the main thing that I was doing those full like practice exams. So you get used to sitting there for that many hours and focusing. And it's really important to not just take the exams, but to also really review your answers and understand why you got things right and why you got things wrong. Because again, so much of the MCAT is about like the strategy and understanding the logic and not just the content itself. And then I also usually tell people to use the AAMC materials, like their practice exams and question banks, at the end of their studying, because those are the people who make the MCAT, and it's helpful to have kind of that super relevant content at the end, so it's the most fresh in your mind, because all the test prep companies will like try their best to imitate what the AAMC is doing in their questions, but nothing is the same as the actual AMC itself. So I recommend saving that for last. But this is just kind of a general guideline. This is not how everyone does it. This is how I did it and how I usually recommend the people I tutor to do it, but different things work for different people. People have different strengths. It's just an example to kind of give you like a baseline idea of how some people go about this. You can go to the next slide. So I just wanted to give some kind of like general tips. Like I said before, content review is not everything. You really want to be able to practice a lot so that you understand the way the AAMC test makers think. Active recall is super important in terms of content. I really like Anki. I know not everyone does, but I also a plug for Anki. I am so glad that I learned how to use it for the MCAT, because now I use it in med school every day, and it's a steep learning curve. It's not the most user friendly, so it was nice to use it for the MCAT. But anything where you're actively recalling information is going to be more helpful than just if you're passively rewriting or reading things, anything like that. If you're able to do practice questions and exams, that's going to help the material stick much better. I also really liked tracking my study hours. I used like a spreadsheet. There are also apps out there that you can use. I think it kept me motivated to kind of see those hours building up and seeing. I wrote like this, how many hours I studied this content and what I did every day, so I could kind of see that progress. I felt like that was really helpful to keep track and to keep me motivated. Up to you guys. I also really like building up the stamina over time, because I know sitting for an 8-hour exam is not something that we do very often in undergrad or anything like that. So that can be a big barrier. So it's important to kind of work towards being able to focus for that amount of time. I don't know if anyone else can see this. Alex, I don't know. Oh, there we go. Okay. Could you go to the next slide, Alex?
Sorry, my internet is really.
You're good.
Is it
Oh,
this
sorry.
one?
It's the previous one.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, the building up stamina over time. When you first start studying, don't jump in and do a whole like full length exam or do a whole cars section, because it's just going to be draining and not helpful. I like to build it up over time, like do 3 passages in a row, then 4, until you work up to that full length. It's going to take a while. It's a really long time to stay focused, and it's just something they have to work at, unfortunately. I know also a lot of people like to use mnemonics, especially for things like biochem. That is super helpful, and I do like recommend that. It's just that sometimes people make mnemonics for like literally everything, and then you get them confused. So just be careful of that. That's something that I definitely ran into, and some of the people I've tutored have run into as well. And then also a lot of people struggle with memorizing the equations for like chem and physics. I mean, you have to memorize them, unfortunately, but for me, it was helpful to try to learn them more in context and do practice problems with them. So I really understood the equations, and it wasn't just straight memorization. I think that helps kind of keep them straight in your head, because a lot of them are related and it gets confusing, but that's just a little advice. Also during content review, I found it helpful to not, I wouldn't do like the whole physics book in like however many weeks. I would try to break it up every day so that I was doing a different topic every day, because I know everyone likes certain subjects more than others. So sometimes you can procrastinate the ones that you don't like as much, but it's just nice to have that variety and use your mind in different ways each day. I also liked some of the focus apps that you can use so you study for a certain amount of time and then take like a 15-minute break or whatever. That's helpful to just kind of keep track, and for me, I had to force myself to put my phone down and not get distracted. So that's something I recommend if that's a problem that you guys have as well. Next slide. So this is just kind of a sample of the resources that I used personally. Again, there's a lot out there, different things work for different people. I just kind of wanted to give you guys an idea of how someone chose what would work for them and just stick with that. I used the Kaplan book set, any book set, it's all the same, honestly. Some are better in certain areas than others, but I wouldn't lose your mind trying to like pick the best books. It all has the information in it. I didn't use the Psych Soc book. There's an MCAT Bros document out there for Psych Soc. I can send that in the Slack after the meeting, but that was super comprehensive, and I wound up just doing that instead of the book at all, because the Kaplan books are like not very comprehensive, and there's just a lot of terminology and stuff for Psych Soc. But again, it's up to you. Different things work for different people. And then I only use WMC Materials and Jack Weston for the cars section. I think that for cars, people get really wrapped up in strategies and things like that. And I think it can be hard because some of the third-party materials aren't as, they don't really closely replicate like what the WMC cars is actually like, because it's kind of like their logic and explanations for questions can be kind of confusing. That's just what I did and what I had kind of heard from other people who had taken it. I don't know if that's still true, or if I'm sure other people have used different resources, but that's just what I did. I use Anki every day. Like I said, I found that super helpful. And then for practice questions, I loved UWorld. It's expensive, but it's really, really helpful. I thought they have great explanations to all their answers for the questions. I am planning on using that in med school too, so it's a great resource. It is expensive, unfortunately, so if you can find any kind of like bootleg version of that, I'm probably not supposed to tell you to do that, but go for it. And then again, the WAMC question banks are, you know, is as close as it gets to the real MCAT, so I would save those for later. And then you can use pretty much any full length exams that you want. There, a lot of the test prep companies will have like the first exam is free and you can get access to those. I've used a bunch of different companies because I just use the free ones because they charge a lot of money for those. So those are awesome. I did 10 total, which is a lot. You don't have to do that many, but I really think that full length exams are awesome to get used to sitting there for that long and practicing and to understand like the real logic behind the questions. And the WMC materials are, again, the best. I would save them for last so it's fresh in your mind. And my actual score was the exact average of my WMC exam scores. That's not always true for everyone, but I think it's a good predictor to see where you're at as you're kind of coming to the end of your studying and deciding if you need to postpone. It's not the end of the world. It's really not fun to retake the MCAT. So if you can avoid it, if that means postponing, honestly, I would do it. You really want to be one and done if you can. I know it's not fun to realize that you're not where you want to be as you're going into the exam, but I think it's worth postponing if you're not hitting a score that you're comfortable with on those WAMC exams, especially. I think that's everything in the presentation. We can go into breakout rooms now and you guys can ask your questions. If anybody has any questions for me personally or for anybody else, please use the Slack. Like we're all here to be a resource for you guys. So don't be shy and please feel free to ask your questions that way too. But other than that, I think we can start the breakout rooms.
Juliana, you actually have a question in the chat about Anki cards.
Oh, thank you. Okay, it says, how did you implement Anki for content review? Are there pre-made decks or did you make your own? There are a ton of pre-made decks and they are awesome. Honestly, there's a bunch of like Reddit threads that have them all listed out. I think the one I used was called like Mile Down or something like that. We'll send that in the Slack as well, so you guys have access to that. I didn't make any of my own cards at all. Making your own cards can be super time consuming. And now in med school, I also don't make my own cards because it just takes forever. So yeah, we can definitely send the pre-made decks for you guys too.
Somebody had their hand raised.
Yeah.
They may have gone into a breakout room now. Okay. But they are open and I just labeled them randomly with 2 mentors in each. So mentors, you'll see your name and you can just go into the room and start from there. And I'll probably be in my room late just to make sure everybody is good.
Okay, thank you. Alex, I think Stefan and Blake are not in rooms, possibly.
Who?
Yeah, so Stefan's my middle name.
I see.
Yeah.
So who did I forget? Is there anybody that got left off the list? Blake?
Yeah.
All right, Blake, you're gonna go into the room with where it says Stefan, and I'm gonna change that name right now.
I don't see the button for me to join a different breakout room.
I should be able to assign you to yours. Give me 1 second. Assign to, here you go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I may need to be assigned to one too.
Who's that? CJ?
Yeah. Sorry.
Any particular room you want to go?
Oh no, just random. Surprise me.
All right, I got you.
Okay.
I think the participants might also not be like evenly spread out. Seems
Yeah,
like
that's
they're
why
all
I
at the
was.
top.
That's why I was like trying to move some around to
Oh.
different rooms. That's why I moved him to a room that only had one. We should. All right. Let me change the name of this one. Why won't it let me change the name? All right. Blake, I'm just gonna assign you to this room that says Steven. I don't know
Yeah,
why
that's
it's
fine.
being weird and not letting me change the name, but I'll figure it out.
Thank
Perfect.
Thanks.
And then can you get into yours?
The one with Milliard, that's the one you want me to go to?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're set. All right. I will see you. Just message me if you have any problems.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right, no problem.
This upcoming cycle.
Congratulations on graduating.
Thank you.
My name is Demar Barnes. I'm a graduate student. Actually, I graduate next semester with my master's in biotechnology at Johns Hopkins, and plan on taking my MCAT next semester as well for the upcoming class.
Nice, nice. So I think a good way to do it, just to keep it comfortable and casual, you guys can just ask whatever questions you have for Alex and I, and we'll answer them. And there's no bad question. And if you feel embarrassed to ask in a group form, I used to be like that, and I would be like texting, that's fine too. Or if you want to message us privately, that's fine as well. But you probably have a question that someone else has, so don't be embarrassed.
Also, feel free to type in the chat as well
Yes.
if you don't want. You can also directly send them to us, and we will keep your anonymity. I can't even speak right now. Sorry.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So if you guys used UWorld when studying for the MCAT, how many questions a day did you do, and how did you go about reviewing the ones you got wrong?
Jessica, did you use UWorld?
I did not use UWorld while studying for the MCAT. It's something that
Okay.
I use here in medical school. Did you use it, Alex?
I used it. So for me, UWorld honestly became probably the highest yield thing for me. I think it's one of the best question banks besides the AAMCs. I kind of tried to break my day apart in different ways. As I got closer to the test, I kind of broke it apart by the way I was going to see the sections throughout the exam. So I tried to mimic, hey, I'm going in this order because I'm going to be seeing things in that order on test day, and it made sense to me personally. I don't recall the exact. I was really mainly doing a lot of like trying to see, like time myself and kind of get the timing right on questions. So I don't really think I had like true limits on the amount of questions. I was kind of gauging more so based on time I was studying and kind of seeing like, could I go through several passages? Could I keep going? And then the way I used UWorld as a diagnostic for the questions I got wrong was there's different levels of getting something wrong, right? Like, I think the biggest thing with the MCAT is I think a lot of things that trip people up is not reading exactly what they're asking for or not understanding what the question is asking you for. Because sometimes it seems simpler than it is, and it is sometimes just that simple. And I think we overcomplicate it. And so was it because of that I got something wrong? Then it's not a gap in my content knowledge. But if it was just like I have zero clue what they're talking about, then I was going to kind of take a step back and review that topic. So I went to basically align myself to watch different videos that were associated with that topic. I then went back and looked at the Kaplan books. And before kind of approaching that topic again, I needed to make sure that I actually had a grasp of what that topic was, and then kind of use that as an assessment. So I think it was a good gauge in like how well do I know this content, but how much do I need to go back and review some of it was kind of how I used it.
Two things I'll add to what Alex said is when doing the questions, make sure you review them and the explanation choices. So like, let's say you got a question wrong on DNA polymerase, make sure, so first ask yourself, why did I get it wrong? Did I not understand what DNA polymerase does? And then read the answer choices for everything else, because that could, you might not get a question on DNA polymerase. They might ask you about topoisomerase. They might ask you about helicase. Make sure you know so when you're studying one question, technically you're studying like 4 or 5 topics, right? So make sure you're reviewing all of it and truly understand why. Another thing with questions that Alex said that he mentioned that's really good, and this is a technique that I picked up more in medical school and I should have done it more in the MCAT. So the exam's already really long, right? And you're going to find yourself, you'll read a whole passage or you'll read a whole question, and you get to the end and you read a question like, I don't even remember what I read, or I don't know what's relevant. Something I like to do in medical school, I read what the question's asking me. That way I know what do I need to focus on in this passage. Like, what are they asking me? And that helps specifically for cars too. So.
Got it. That was very helpful. Thank you both so much.
You're very welcome. And with questions too, I think practicing them timed, because that can be an issue where you can know the information. Like if I let you have 5 minutes and ask you a question, you can answer it. But now when I tell you have 72 seconds or 80 seconds, it changes. And even just watching a stop clock while you're on a test, it's distracting. You don't want to go into the test on the first time you're doing, although you studied so hard, the first time you're doing these questions is on the timer, that will mess you up. It will mess you up. So practice timed questions. Any other questions?
I was gonna say, so I'm a retake. I'll be a retake student. I was a non-traditional student, so when I took the MCAT, very unfamiliar with it, but having taken a heavy base master's program that's dealing with all the science, just I'm very like submerged in it, so I have to change my approach. But as far as like I guess I'm very interested in like the U world for those who do use it. Seeing how that probably be the transition for medical school. Would you just buy a questionnaire package, or how would you invest in the U world? I guess is my question.
So it's a subscription, and it's like timed. It's like I think it's I forget, you got a certain amount of days, and so like it's like you get 6 months or a year or like 3 months or X, Y, and Z, and they sell it in like set amount of time. So what I would do is I would kind of try and like block out like what your studies plan is, and make sure you're buying that subscription just for that plan. So like I had to retake it as well. It happens. It's part of it's a part of it, this whole process. But trust me, and I was non-trad, so I was like the first time I was studying, I was like COVID hit, and I was like had gotten the time off from work, and then I had to go back to work, and then my first take was like trying to balance studying and keeping up with everything. Thought I was fresh in my mind, and it wasn't. So I think I mean, when I took it at the time that I was most successful, it was literally just making sure you're planned out. Hey, my UWorld, when is this subscription gonna end? Things like that. And I will say UWorld does get expensive. I've had friends find workarounds. They've shared subscriptions. I will say you just have to be comfortable with other people knowing like how well you're doing on questions, because when you are sharing it does track your metrics. And it's just a Q bank, so they have a finite amount of questions for the MCAT. Just like I think for STEP, it's a finite amount of questions they have, and you kind of use all those questions to the best of your ability. So it's just a try and plan it out before you press that buy button. Because once you press that buy, it's like any subscription model, once you have to like add time to it, it kind of sucks. And I know people who've done that. And this road, I'm not gonna lie to you, is very expensive. Like, all of the tests, like I thought I was in medical school, and my office hits me up all the time, like, oh, you have this fee, you have this fee, and like all these things add up. So I would just say like be cognizant of that, and plan it out. And then we're also here. So like if you need people to help you figure all that stuff out, like we are here as a tool.
Thank you. I was gonna say, like from my first time taking it, I feel like that I picked up a routine pretty much like near the end. Like I think I want to say like maybe 4 weeks out before I took my exam. And like I said, I wasn't really knowledgeable about the MCAT or like how important it was to like get it right on the first try. Like I just always had the mindset like if I don't get the score I want, I'm gonna just retake it again. But I guess can you reiterate on like trying to find that routine? Because like I feel like I have to find that routine again and kind of just like try to balance it with my graduate classes.
Do you want me to take that, Alex?
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
So what I did when finding my routine, first, I asked myself, when do I want to take the exam? So let's say I'm studying 4 or 5 months out. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take it in June, for example. That's actually when I took mine. I remember I took my test June 19th. That's how much that test scared me that I remember this like 4 years later. So I took it June 19th. And so what I did is I was also so I took my junior year of undergrad and I was in classes. So you have to be very realistic with what's going on in your day to day. I understood that I had class from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then I did a prep course. So I was one of those people who did a prep course because I'm very type A and I'm very regimented. I like someone telling me what to do and then I just do it and I show up and I execute it that way. But then I also had to be like, okay, what works for me? Reading pages, that has never been my thing. I've always been a video person. I'll read 80 pages and it'll take me 3 weeks to get through a section when I could have watched videos for a day and a half and I just went through all of biochem, and then I can rewatch the videos over and over instead of reading. And then you're supposed to be highlighting. I find myself highlighting every sentence. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this isn't working. So first identify what you have in your day to day. If you're working, do I need to cut back on working? Because it's multiple things that go into setting for the MCAT. And that was something that I had to do. I had to, just take an out on the bank account and be like, I got to study. I can't work, can't do all those extraneous things because I was doing that in the beginning. And I was like, I'm not getting as much studying in as I'm supposed to for this exam. And 6 months sounds cute now. And then the next thing you know, the test is in 4 weeks. And I was like, okay, I need to stop. Not gonna be going anywhere. I'm not going to the movies. I don't need any of that. I just need to study. And then I just made the schedule. And the way I made my schedule is from my classes and how I did. So I didn't do well in physics. So I knew I needed to do physics. When I said I didn't do well, it was fine, but I didn't feel comfortable in physics. So I made sure that physics was something I didn't save for just the end. I worked on it throughout the whole time. So identify your weaknesses and don't shy away from those. Make sure you're constantly working on that. Don't think it's okay. I'll do well in the other sections and then physics will be physics. So then that's kind of like what I did. So I made a schedule, was realistic with my time. First, I think having a test date in mind, not an exact date, but just like a timeline, like I'm taking in June or I'm taking in February, and say, okay, so in 3 months, how can I structure my day? What classes am I taking? And work that in that way.
Trust me, I like just to echo, like I'm not fully type A. I call myself type BA. Like I need some flexibility in things I do. But I do have certain things that I'm like pretty anal about, like just some of the things. But I also knew like, so the first time I took it, it was, as I said, COVID happened, things happened. And I was trying to find that balance again after like going back to work, and that was tough. The time when I took it, I did really well. I basically set that schedule, knew the test date I had in mind, and realistically said, "Hey, just like Jessica said, like you have to kind of be able to say like I'm studying towards this purpose. I'm going to take this test at this date." and you can always maneuver from it. Like it'll, trust me, it'll behoove you now, because as I have my M2 like mentors who are about to take step one, they're all like planning. That's how they plan their study schedule. I'm taking step in June, right? Like, so I need to hit these things, and I need to. It allows you to have checkpoints, right? Like sometimes you have to be realistic with yourself. Don't. And what I will say is, me personally, I couldn't go cold turkey of just like straight studying. I knew I needed like to be able to do different things. So I had to schedule time to go work out. Like I still schedule time on my schedule and my calendar to go work out, which sounds insane, but it's just a realistic thing that helps me like stay focused and make sure I'm taking care of that aspect. Like, oh, now I feel good about my own personal health. Or schedule like, hey, I'm gonna go take this time to go do something else other than studying. But make sure you're realistic, right? Like you're in school. I was working, so I knew I got off of work at X time on certain days, and or if I had an OR, like I worked in intense clinical research, so I was in the OR. So I knew like OR days I needed to be a little bit more flexible, but I knew a hard cutoff time of like, all right, I need to start studying. Or because I'm gonna take some time between these cases, I know when there's dead periods in the day. So use that time wisely, but also be realistic with yourself and don't cheat yourself. When you take breaks, don't let a break turn into like 30 to an hour to hour and a half, right? Like you're gonna have times where you get frustrated. That's why you give yourself the day off or something. But use that time like to just do something productive, right? Like just change if something's not working, like if watching videos for that day is not working. All right, maybe I changed and now I'm doing Anki, right? Like during that time period, right? Like it's okay to have some movement if that's who you are. Some people need that strict rigidity that I'm doing this at every time. Like nowadays I do Anki at the same time early in the morning just because it helps me. But everything else in my day, like I'm just, if something's not working, I'm gonna switch it up. So I think that's one of the things I've found helpful.
So maybe this might be something new if you even want to create like an Excel sheet, and this is for everyone, and like say, okay, and like literally put Monday through Sunday out, put what you do in a normal day to day, and that alone you'll see like sometimes things might be taking up more time than you think. You might think, well, I'm just working part-time, and then you don't realize that your part-time is almost like a full-time. And then so so just seeing what you already have without studying in your day to day. And then say, okay, can I allocate an hour and a half on Mondays, maybe because I'm working a full day, maybe Tuesday I can put in 4 hours and like, put in block times. And then once you do that and you start your studying regime, do it off of your weakness. The subjects that you're weaker in, those need more time. So that could help you. And then also I did what Alex said. I blocked off when I go to Orange Theory. I blocked off when I go to church, because when you don't block those things off, it's easy if you don't have a schedule and you're just waking up willy-nilly every day, you won't hit what you're supposed to. Because if I'm just like, I'm studying, and then I'm like, I'll go to the gym at noon. I'll go to the gym at 2. Next thing you know, it's 9 p.m. I'm not going nowhere. Like, you know what I mean? So if I know, then I'm studying. So I like to do going to the gym as like my break. So like in med school right now, studying for step exams. I study from 6 to 9, take a little break, and then I do 10 to 12, and then lunch is my workout, come back, protein shake, and then keep going. But I have to put that in, if not, I won't go. I won't do it.
Trust me, you will. Those things will leave you.
Yeah, well, especially when you're studying and you're starting to get overwhelmed and you're like, I'm not doing well. You're like, I can't go to the gym. The mental health, and this is something I really want you guys to implement in your day-to-day, starting in pre-med, it's everything. If you're not feeling good physically or mentally, studying is going to be, you didn't get anything out of it. So stepping away, and it's not just working out. If you like to read a book, or even don't feel guilty. If you like to watch Netflix but don't Netflix and chill, and now you binge watching, you're on episode 4 and you started on episode 1. 30 minutes, but like, okay, I'm going to have lunch, I'm going to take a break, 30 minutes, I'm going to let it go, and then I'm going to come back. But schedule, breaks in that schedule too.
Yeah. And
Any
make sure
other
you are taking care of yourself. Like you trust me. The first time I took this exam, I was not taking care of myself, and it reflects in your day. The test day is long. Things will get to you. And I just had a mentee go through a similar thing. He called me, I think, a week and a half before his exam and had a breakdown and was like, I just scored terrible on a practice exam. I'm going to bomb this exam. And I said, relax. You've been doing very well. go do something else. And I think he went to go work out or hang with some friends and gave himself some time off before the test, and he knocked it out of the park. So it's important.
And we're here for you guys if you guys want to make your schedule. I know that I'm more than willing if you want to send me a message and be like, hey, can you help me? Or what do you think about this schedule? I'm more than willing to look at your schedule and help you out. Or even if you want to keep it for yourself and your schedule's going fine, and then you're a month in, your scores haven't improved at all, send us a message and we'll talk about, okay, maybe we should rearrange it better this way. Let's do this. Let's use a different method, because if you're doing the same thing, what is the definition of insanity? Trying the same thing and expecting different results. You don't want to do that. So I'm more than willing if you want to send a message on Slack, anything like that, and go through it. If you feel like I'm going to fail, I can't do this. Should I postpone? Should I take the test? We'll answer. We'll talk you through it and give you the best advice we can.
And I'm gonna plug, I don't know if anybody's bad with distractions, but once I found out about Pomodoro's clock and some apps that take over your computer, it helped me a ton. Trust me. And keep your phone out of sight, because I'm very bad at getting distracted by it.
And not just phone, if you have notifications that come on your laptop and you're studying and then you see, so-and-so's like, hey, blah, 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 that will distract you. Because mind you, you're in the middle of putting a thought process in your head. Even if you just glance at it, you'll be like, hey, what was I doing? And so even turn off the notifications. I don't have the notifications up on my laptop because for that reason. Let's see. What's helpful too, if we talk about mistakes that we did. So mistakes while studying. So something that was new for me in undergrad was I was one of those people, I went to class every day. And then I don't know why, I don't even do this in medical school anymore because I learned the hard way, term one. Rewriting notes and doing all these things and not wanting to do practice questions because I was like, I just need to study more. I don't want to do practice questions and get a bad grade. I need to study more and then I'll do practice questions. Get the 30, the 40, the 50, the 20 on a practice question and not on the test. So as growing up as an athlete, I always tell myself the first time I compete in something, this shouldn't be the day of the race, the first time that I do something. And so that was a mistake that I was making before where I just want to read. I just want to, if I just rewrite it, if I just rewatch the video, then I'll get it, and then I'll do questions. Do questions. That's how you're going to be tested and that's how you'll learn. Because sometimes you think you could read something too or watch a video and you think you got it. And then you do questions and you're like, I don't got it. But then if you had not done questions, you wouldn't know that you didn't have it like that. So make sure that was a mistake, like waiting too long to do questions. Do questions from the jump. Even if it's just like you're going to do 10 questions in the morning and then you're like, I'm going to do another 20 at night. Do that for a week or two. And the next week, step it up. Okay, I'm going to do 20 and 20. And on the weekend, I'm going to do 60. You guys hear that? I apologize.
No, I mean, I think some of my biggest mistakes were, I think, prioritizing Kaplan too much the first time around. I think content review is great. Don't get me wrong. I think once you learn more about, like, you get hammered on this in med school, but like active learning versus passive learning, and you continuously learn like what works best for you. And I was one of those people who try to like, oh, let me take notes, and just like Jessica, like, you get to med school and you think, oh, I can just get a whole bunch of slide decks and I can copy notes and I can rewrite stuff. It takes too much time, and you learn quickly that it's not efficient. And it's something like we talk about all the time. And I've learned even more in med school, like the efficiency just allows you to do so much more that are things that are high yield. So not prioritizing, like, do the content review, but make sure that you're taking away, like, okay, these are the big picture ideas that I need to make sure that I have an understanding of. And then testing them with active questions, active things like Anki, or things like, I know some people like creating their own questions, that those things are actively helping you learn and they're helping you remember things. Just taking notes all day and reading them, I'm going to be honest, after a while, things start to blend together. And what you thought a topoisomerase was is what DNA polymerase is. And your eyes just aren't going to be working anymore and you become mush. Trust me, I've been there. I've learned the hard way, trying to cram some of those things into your head. It's just not as easy. And just making sure you're staying on top of it. If you do something each day, allow yourself some like leeway. Yes, you're gonna have bad days, you're gonna have great days. But if you do something at each day, it helps so much more than if you think, oh well, yesterday was a bad day, I'm just gonna make today like super heavy. It doesn't really work. It's one of those things where there's really no trade-off. You just kind of have to be consistent. And you're just gonna have times where you don't do a ton. I mean, it happens in med school. My birthday was the weekend before that, and I'm still catching up and paying for it in different ways. And it happens, but you just have to know how to make sure that you're taking the time to do little by little, and it makes it so much easier.
And don't think you're not learning through questions. Like in medical school, that's the biggest way, at least I can speak for myself, that I learn on UWorld is through questions. Because if you're doing them correctly and then you're reviewing them, don't ever just do questions and not look at them. Because then there was no point of you doing the questions. The only thing you gain from that is, I guess, endurance and sitting. Because if you don't know what you got right and what you got wrong, there really was no point of doing those questions. Make sure you review them and not just what the correct answer is, but the other explanations. And you really, really do learn so much. Because like I said, again, you're learning 4 things through 1 question. And the test takers, if you're using the test taking sites, it's the people who are making the test. If you do more and more questions, you start seeing what is important. And then so while you rewrote 3 pages on one thing, you realize they don't even ask that. What they ask, and it helps you focus on what is important while you're studying.
I have a question. Thank you all so much for your advice so far. It's been very helpful. But if you could go back to your undergraduate years, what types of, what tips would you give for someone who's preparing to take the MCAT in undergrad?
So I needed to be more realistic with my day-to-day and my timeline. So I did take my junior year. I did go to medical school straight out of graduation. But my timeline was, I was doing the most. I was doing it junior year. I was taking 16 credit hours of just science. I was taking an MCAT prep course on Wednesdays so I had class 8 to 4. I had class from 6 p.m. to midnight. I lived an hour away from campus, drove back home, had an anatomy the next morning at 7. All those things were on you, right? So maybe it's okay to take a gap year. It's actually very common now. Then maybe I could have gone into one of the schools that I wanted to go to as opposed to rushing it. So be realistic with your timeline, trying to gain whatever you want to graduate now and do this now. And then you sabotage the whole thing and you have to sit out a year, or you didn't get into the school you wanted and you look back, you're like, was it worth it? Because I was trying to have this arbitrary timeline in my head. No, it really wasn't, So I think that's definitely a mistake I made, was my timeline with just taking a junior year, doing this, and then you have to do your rec letter. And it's more than just your MCAT and your GPA. It's gotten so competitive now. You need extracurriculars, you need shadowing. And and I'm still like this to this day. And I try to be Michelle and like just do everything, but it's a lot. You got to shadow, you have to have some research, you have to do non-clinical research, clinical research, you have to get your recommendation letters. Doing all that while spending 16 credit hours and doing a prep course, honestly paid so much money for it. And I don't think I got a bang for my buck, not because of the course, but because of me, because I couldn't 100% commit to that course the way I was supposed to, because I was doing literally like 20 other things for school, granted, but still wasn't the smartest decision now that I'm more mature.
I completely agree. I did take a gap year just because it is so competitive. Like, I feel for you guys. It is only getting more and more competitive, but it's also kudos to you guys because you guys do amazing things. I will say, my gap years helped me a ton. They just helped me not only grow as a person, but just I knew I needed to get some clinical research. I was an athlete, so I didn't have time to do like getting shadowing and all that stuff. And all those things like weigh and play a role. But I think just the time management, right? Like if you can learn that in undergrad, I think it pays dividends for MCAT, pays dividends for everything you do, because everything from this stage forward, right? Like when you matriculate, it's all time management, right? Like you make the choices and the time, choices that you make, and it helps tremendously to have like, hey, like I have my life under control time wise. I was very much so like pretty flow with what was going on at the time in undergrad, and it took me some grounding to really like get to the point I am to now, and I'm still like growing every single day. Like hearing Jessica talk, I literally am like, oh yeah, it's a great idea. I can implement some of those things. So like, just take little nuggets from everybody, and you guys will be good.
Thank,
And in
thank you.
terms of the application process, and it's not to discourage, but I also say people, you have to be realistic. So when you make your list of schools that you want to apply to, research those schools, look at what their average matriculating GPA class was, look at what their average MCAT score was. The reason why I say this is not to discourage anybody. You want to go to an Ivy League, do it. But I just want to tell you, you have to understand how the committees are. Let's say they say their average class, they show you the past years, they'll show you 21, 20, 19, they'll show you everything. And if they say their average MCAT score was a 512 and you got a 497 or you got a 501, you have to really take that in consideration. Also think about the money aspect of it, right? You're going to pay for an application. And let me tell you something, almost everybody gives you a secondary because you also pay $150 or $200 to get a secondary, and you think you're
And the
feeling
secondary
good.
money
I just got
goes directly to them.
directly to them, and then you won't ever hear back. So the reason why I say is look at the schools and look at what their stats are to see where do I have the best chance of getting in realistically. I'm a dreamer, I'm always a dreamer, but also just for yourself to be realistic. If their average was a 512 or a 515, you're probably not going to get in with a 501 unless, there are other factors. You have a really good GPA, you have research, you have all those other things. If you don't have those things and you're not a well-rounded candidate, probably not going to get into that school. There's a lot of other schools where they'll tell you it's 504, 505, and then also you can be like, okay, this time I took my MCAT, it was 497 or it's 501. I know I can do better. I wasn't focused. I didn't do as many questions as I should have. I never even did a full-length practice test. Let me sit down these next 3 months and I can get it. I can get a 508. I can get a 509. Don't rush the whole thing, spend all this money, spend $600 to $1,000 applying, and that wasn't your best you, because then it was all just a waste. So look up the schools, know their average GPA, know their average MCAT. Some schools are very big on research. Know those things if you're not in research. And they're big on that,
Yeah, no, I would definitely say that. And there's also, as you go through it and as you get to the other side, you learn there's so many hidden things that adcoms like talk about and look at. And I will say this, connections, no matter what it is in life, will behoove you. So if you can connect with students on their campus who that one can advocate for you, and two can say like, oh yeah, like I know this person, they've talked to me, they have a real interest. Some schools actually play a real big role. Like I know certain schools, not to name any, that if you name drop a certain person, that in an essay or whatever, 95% of those candidates end up getting an interview, right? And just because that person's vouch or word means so much for their adcom. But I also know schools where they will advertise like different minimums. In some schools, like the minimum is a true minimum, like we will take people at that minimum. Some schools, that minimum is very false, and they will not take you if you're near that minimum, right? Like it's just a realistic thing, right? Like I had a mentee who was asking me like about MCW. She was like, "Hey, I have this score," and I was like, "I'm not sure. Let me ask." I mean, you took the time to ask me the question. We met, so let me ask somebody who sits on our adcom. And they were like, "Oh no, like we have some students. It's gonna be a fight, but like if you let me know their name, if they come up in a meeting, because the way it works is you all's names, as long as you get past the readers, your names come up in a meeting, and they basically just talk about you. And the way you get an interview, the way you get accepted is people have to advocate for you. So that's why connections behoove you, because those people, if they feel some type of way, like, hey, we want you here, then they're going to advocate for you. You also have to look at, what does the school want? Like, what is the school saying, right? Like, everybody's mission has a mission statement. I'm going to be honest, a lot of them sound the same. After a while, you'll write about them and you'll be like, I don't know what school I'm talking about anymore, because a lot of them, they are going to say, we want to produce amazing physicians who are ready and prepared for the next step. But to be honest, ask around and figure out, like, what is the culture? What do they like? Do I fit into that culture? Do they want somebody like me? Like, I know my school was having a huge push for, and we still are, like, our dean of students, I'm like very close with. It was like, I'm gonna be really frank, Alex. Like, I'm trying to get some money because we need more people, more diversity in our school. We need more applicants of color. And like, we brought in more, I think my class was like the largest diversity we had, and the class prior to me was that. But we've made those pushes, and certain schools value that. Certain schools are like, hey, we want people with tons of research, right? We want to crank out a ton of research this year. And they're going to take people who have like 4 and 5 publications, or they have like track records of being in the NIH, things like that, right? Like, you just have to kind of figure out what those small subtleties are at each school.
And you might be wondering, well, if I don't know anybody, like, how do I get into those? A lot of schools hold events. They have symposiums. They have medical school open house nights. So if you can, again, Google that and see when that is. And if you're in a relatively close distance, if you're applying to schools in your state, it's worthwhile to take a trip. I know I did that. You go to symposiums, you meet, sometimes med students are there because usually we have to present at those things, or we're also part of committees and we have to host those things. And that's how you get to know people. And sometimes there's faculty there. We have professors that are there. We have, and that's what Alex is talking about, of how you get to know people. It's like the adult world. You're gonna realize that this is really how it is. And as I'm, preparing applications for residency, it's even more so like that. It's even more so who you know, where you did your rotation, and so attend those events. And you can even email. They usually have like events coordinator. If you go on the website, you'd be like, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. I'm a second year, undergrad student, and I'm interested in your school. I'd like to know if you guys have any up and coming open houses or events for your medical school. And that alone, like, oh, no, and then when you go and you see that person, introduce yourself. Hello, I emailed you last month. Thank you so much. Networking. It's going to be very big. It's huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Damani.
I was gonna ask you all, do you have any insight on like scholarships? Because I was meeting with my advisor, and he was basically telling me, like, kind of like figure out 3 pillars that you're looking for when it comes to this application process. And one of mine would be scholarships, diversity, and innovative medicine. But a lot of medical students don't really share like the insight of like if they are on a scholarship or if they do get financial funding. And I just want to know, what's your insight on that?
Yeah.
So I definitely am on scholarships and financial funding because I don't have, no, it's seriously, it's like almost 6 figures a year to go.
Yeah.
So there's scholarships. So this is something also that you can find out while applying to schools, what kind of scholarships they have. They have like hardship scholarships. They have a lot of schools now have specific scholarships for like minorities. They have scholarships for almost anything now. And they have scholarships if you served in the military. They have scholarships if like you're a parent going through medical school. And some of these, it's not even through the school. You can literally go on Google and be like, scholarships for medical, and there's like all these websites. There's like Unidays does things. Like there were scholarships, like if you write an essay, and it's not even big essay, sometimes it's just like a paragraph and you write an essay and they pick winners and they give money. So you can Google that. Also look into your schools, and they really are. I'm on scholarship, and so I got scholarship for academics, I got scholarship for hardship, and then I also have a scholarship, I'm being honest, for being a minority. And then once I was in school, keeping up your GPA, you get an academic scholarship. So then I was able to transfer from undergrad into med school because I
Are
mean, I'm
these
not
like
rolling money.
are these
No,
like
trust me.
Esther, or are these like are these scholarships supporting you throughout your medical school or your 4 years, or is it just something that you
So
apply for every year?
some of them it's so like the academic, they look at it term by term. How does that go? The minority scholarship is given throughout the whole year. And then I do have like the FAFSA and the federal loan servicing. That is like every single year. Just keep doing that. And it does cover. I mean, it's tight. See, this is a whole other aspect of medical school that people don't tell you.
Trust me, it is tight.
It
It is
it's
always tight.
it is very tight, and you're working so much in school. Like, I mean, I don't know about like it's literally like this 16, 18-hour day thing all the time. And that's because I cut myself off because I have a migraine and I can't do anymore. You don't even have time to work. My school even has a sign-up contract that we're not allowed to work. You're subject to dismissal if you're
There's a
working.
lot, yeah.
So you do have to, your finances is a big part. So then I knew I had to work hard in school. And then I was Googling. I had a lot of random scholarships too that I would do. There's organizations, national organizations. There's like Black Doctors in Medicine. Like there's organizations for every single like ethnicity group. My church, I went up to my church as something, if you guys have groups, I went up to my church. I was like, I'm going to medical school. I'd appreciate if there was any sort of funding that you can do. And they award a small scholarship each month that they send $1,000, which, it sounds like, oh, in the beginning, I thought that was a lot, but then I realized rent was $1,400. So, that 1,000, I didn't even get to see it. It went straight to somebody else. But there's a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I will say there's tons of different funding. There's institutional, like she was talking about, like your school, different schools have different endowments, different schools have different scholarships that they'll offer, and there's for a plethora of things, like just as she was touching on. And what I will say, I think the opportunity scholarship wise open more as you're getting through medical school. So M1 year is probably like your most difficult year getting scholarships. As you continue to go, more and more opportunities open up and just around. So like look at different societies around you. They all offer scholarships. They all will have different things going on. So I think those are different opportunities. But I mean, as she said, I'm just gonna keep it real. It does get tight. It's towards the end of the semester. I'm already waiting for them to send that next reimbursement load.
Oh, the last
through.
month is the worst. You wait for the next semester reimbursement. The last month is seriously the worst. It's honestly, and it adds in a whole nother level of like stress. You're studying for exams and you're like, what am I gonna do? There's still at this point in November, right? And I was like, there's 40 days and there's $200. Like what, and your parents looking at you like, I've done what I can like to help you. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely gets tight. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I will say, you find ways to get different free things, eat at different free lunches and all kinds of different things to save money. But trust me, there are scholarship opportunities and you have to kind of manage, like, am I going to apply to these things and take the time to do that?
And one thing that I will be very honest about is I did, even at that point, receiving all the financial aid that I was getting, it still wasn't enough for a couple of semesters. And the schools, if you're doing well and you're in good standing for them, and because I am involved with tutoring and all those other things, they do work with you. This is obviously not something they're broadcasting. They don't want everybody coming up to them. But if you go to them privately and you're explaining, they understand. And especially with COVID that happened, like they're willing to help work out some things sometimes, or in return, if you're willing to be a tutor, you're willing to do certain things. I know I had to do that because even with all the extra financial help that I could get, it's a lot. Because you have to remember, it's not just tuition you're paying, you have resources, paying for the URoad subscription, just regular day-to-day expenses. And you explain those things and they are willing to work with you privately one-on-one.
And ask your school if they add that. Like certain schools do different things. Like I know for us, for M2, they add that to our technical tuition so that we are allowed to get it added to our loans. But certain schools have different ways of like figuring out the system. And always ask people who've been there before so they know different ways. Marshall, I see you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just have another question about UWorld, but I can wait if we're still talking about scholarships.
Oh no, go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to see if there were like ways to like review questions based on a specific topic. So let's say I was doing like a question on DNA polymerase, for example, and I got that wrong. And I went ahead and reviewed the topic on my own. Now I'm ready to go give it another shot. Does UWorld offer like a way to answer questions just specifically on like DNA polymerase or whatever topic I want to work on?
Sadly, I think my answer, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, they're not that topic specific. They're more like just generically grouped like biochem, like the actual like MCAT like sections. So they will go by sections, but they will not actually say like, hey, this one topic in physics and stuff like that. There are some services like I think boot camp is one of the ones that some people use now in med school that some people have said they've used for MCAT and stuff like that. That does do like topic specific questions. So there are some of those resources, and I think boot camp you can oftentimes find for free, for like a year or something. But I do not believe UWorld has that capability.
Hey,
Somebody-
Alex.
Yep.
I can, if you guys want me to, I can share. Now, this is for like step 1.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if it's for the MCAT as well, but I can share my screen really quick and kind of show you guys what
The UWorld dashboard. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because trust me, I do not have a subscription right now. So I'm not paying for it until right before step.
We were very fortunate. Our school actually gave us a subscription. So, okay, can you guys see this?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you can see like your unused and that kind of stuff, correct, incorrect. You can go by subject. So right now we're doing pathology. And then you can come down here and do systems. Hang me. And then when you expand all, so like for biochemistry, I've already done those questions. Like you can break it down somewhat, but not like, only DNA polymerase or, only like lac operon or something like that. So.
Can I share something, Emily? So I don't know if this works with the MCAT. So with the QBank, when you're studying for step 1 and step 2, for example, when you've completed all of the questions, you can actually go in the search box and you can type in the topic of anything and it'll pull up every single question in the QBank that has that topic. So like right now, if I'm studying and I'm bad, well, this is just an example because I don't even remember truly too much about the MCAT. Let's say I'm studying right now, OB-GYN, I'm getting high diatom moles incorrect. You can put that and it will literally show you every single question. But that's something that once you're done with the QBank, that it shows you.
Okay.
And you can create your own test too. So let's say you're doing, like you said, the example of DNA polymerase, and you got that wrong, and you write other biochemical questions. There's QID numbers on the questions, so you can create tests. And then in the search ID box, you can go ahead and type the QIDs for those numbers, and then it'll create a test with those numbers that you've implemented. Again, I'm very type A, so I've figured. I've done my UWorld QBank 4 times for my step 1. So
Nice.
I
Good
know
luck.
this the year I'm like.
That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I know you guys probably want to go. It's 9:12, but if you guys
Yeah.
have questions, I'm willing to stick around longer. But if you have questions on Slack, you can message us as a group or privately or whichever you want to do.
Yeah, so I know you guys were, I don't know what I walked in on, but I heard you guys talk about scholarships and med school being tight. I'm one of the fortunate people that's not the
Oh yeah,
case.
he's
for me.
living the life. Getting paid.
Apply to uses. Apply to uses. Haha. No, but in all seriousness, when you get to that point where you're applying, like really consider it. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's free, it comes at a cost. We pay 7 attending years by the time we're done. The name of the school is Yusuf. So we get paid as officers. So it's fair enough. Like I live in Bethesda and I'm comfortable. So you get paid for that, but it does come at like the cost where you might do some push-ups at 6:30 a couple days in a month, you know. You will have to salute a couple people. There's extra hierarchy that comes with the military, but you know, and if you don't want to do all of that, then apply HPSP. And if you don't want to do that, then you know, suck it up. You'll graduate, be a doctor, and make the money back. But that's an option. The application's free as well, so something to consider.
And you can do, I don't know if everybody knows what he's talking about with HPSP, but there's also a VA aspect as well. And basically what he's talking about is you serve your time and you get paid a stipend, but you also serve that time back. I think HPSP, my classmate was saying, it's the same commitment as how long your residency is. And then the VA is, I think you just have to work at a VA for the same thing. I think it's the amount of time of your residency.
Yeah. Chase, did you have a question? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Like trying to like raise my hand. I actually pressed the
Yeah,
other one.
not
But
really sure
I don't
what's
know how to
going
get them
on.
out. I'm sure Emily knows because I was just in her break room. But I was in the Army. I was 5 years as a medic. So I was just gonna second the USHIS. It's an awesome school. I have like 3 or 4 physician mentors that I still keep in touch with. I'm out now, but they still call me every now and then, and they're gonna write me letters. But they have nothing but good things to say about USHIS, and they're pretty phenomenal physicians. So that's pretty awesome. But I heard you say USHIS, and I had to say something.
Yeah, no, yeah, USIS is it's a good school, but like every other school, there are cons to it, right? So, I would just advise anybody applying to know what they're getting themselves into before
Oh
you
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
Yeah, so don't I don't know, if you're not trying to do something niche or you don't know what you want to do with your career, like in terms of specialty wise, do not apply Army, dude, because like yeah, it looks cool because there's more numbers, but you will pay for those in push-ups and it sucks. So apply to the Navy or go like public health service. It's great. And like whenever you get to that point, what I'm saying will make sense because they'll give you the options of branches and then you can pick as you feel appropriate. But yeah, good luck.